expose some of the loopholes in sampling that allow lead in water to be low when you collect samples and high when people drink the water. These practices are occurring all over the country, and we've been complaining about them, shouting about them for 10 years, and it took something like Flint before EPA Office of Drinking Water and Groundwater released a memo that will better meet the intent of the lead and copper rule.
Anything else you would recommend along those lines?
All I've ever wanted was the original intent of the lead and copper rule to be met.
Okay. And what about state governments? What more can they do?
Well, you know, the state governments had been operating in this climate that EPA created, in which cheating was condoned, and MDEQ exploited every one of those loopholes to hide the high lead in Flint's water, even to the point where they would not have had to install corrosion control. That is a fact. It's absolutely clear in the record. They were passing the lead and copper rule using these loopholes, and they were using that as an excuse to not install corrosion control. And in fact, there is an email where Mr. Del Toro asked MDEQ to stop pre-flushing, pre-cleaning the pipes the night before sampling. This is something we've been screaming about to stop because it caused lead poisoning of children in DC in 2006 to 2008. And MDEQ said, well, it's not the law yet, and we're not going to do that until EPA makes it the law. And so that was very clear in the emails. They were going to use every single loophole, every trick that EPA allowed to hide this lead and water problem.
Then finally, what can we do as a Congress or as a committee to ensure that governments of all levels are doing all they can to perform basic functioning of providing every American with safe drinking water?
Well, I think the most important thing is to create a climate in which the thousands and thousands of great employees at EPA all across the country and at MDEQs all across the country can do their job, where employees like Mr. Del Toro are allowed to do their job without fear of being retaliated against either directly or indirectly.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hedman, you were the Region 5 Administrator for the EPA, and prior to that worked as an environmental attorney in the Office of the Illinois Attorney General. Do you agree with Mr. Edwards' assessments?
I agree generally that there are improvements to be made in sampling protocols and in the lead and copper rule. And although I'm no longer at EPA, I'm very pleased to see that EPA is moving in that direction.
Okay. One thing I would like to see that we continue to have hearings, like we don't have these hearings and just stop, but maybe 6 months from now or a year from now that we check back on Flint so the people of Flint still know that we're concerned. Of course, they know they have Representative Lawrence and Kildee and my colleagues on the other side from Michigan, but I want you to know that we're all concerned. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to Ranking Member Cummings.
I wanted to say to the gentlelady that I agree with you that we have to continuously follow up on this situation, because the thing that I don't want, every time I think about Flint, I think about Katrina, to be frank with you. And so after all the cameras are gone and the attention moves away, the question is, where are the people left? Where are these children left? And I know we talk a lot about children, but I'm also concerned about the adults because they too are drinking this water. So I'm sure the chairman will work with us. I'm looking forward to that, just so we can stay on top of it. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely, I concur, and I appreciate the gentleman's questions, and she has my commitment that we will continue to follow up. So we'll now recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grossman, for 5 minutes.
Sure, just have a few questions for Ms. Hedman. Wisconsin, it's good to flesh out your background, and I see you graduated from the University of Wisconsin Law School with me, so congratulations. I want to find a little bit how you got the job. You know, you used to work for Lisa Madigan down there in Illinois, and you switched over to this job. Can I ask why you applied for the job, who let you know the job was available, that sort of thing?
I didn't apply for the job. In fact, I actually wrote a number of recommendations for other people to take the job. And when I was first approached, my answer was no. I, however, was persuaded to take the job, I will tell you that one of the reasons I was hesitant is I recognized the huge problems that EPA has to deal with in a period of declining budgets, particularly infrastructure budgets, and it seemed a huge task to take on,
Okay.
but I did.
Okay, who asked you who approached you about the job, or you said you didn't want the job and people approached and kind of begged you?
I received a call from the EPA administrator.
Secretary Jackson?
Yes,
Okay,
Administrator Jackson.
okay. Mr. Edwards, are you kind of familiar with Ms. Hedman's background?
Sorry, Mr. Edwards we can come back to you. He has his own personal water issue in a moment, so we'll be right back.
Okay, why don't should we,
We will come back to you if you'd like. Oh, there he comes. Here he comes. Sorry. He's back. We won't dock you the time. Go ahead, Mr.
well,
Guthrie.
I'll do one more question. Why specifically, or what was your background that caused Ms. Secretary Jackson to feel you'd be qualified for this job?
I understand I'd been recommended by a number of people to her. I have, as you pointed out, a law degree. I also have a PhD in environmental studies, and I've spent my entire life essentially working to protect public health and the environment, often representing citizen groups like the good people of Flint.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, we just asked a question of Ms. Hedman. Are you familiar with her background, or could you comment in general about what you feel are qualifications for running District 5?
No, I don't know anything about her background.
Okay. So in other words, okay, back to Ms. Hedman. So you were hired for EPA at the suggestion of Ms. Jackson. Other people may have recommended you. Could you give me examples of people that you said brought her up as somebody that would cause you to be a good person at District 5?
Waste of
Said other
time.
people had recommended you know who those people were?
I believe that some people in environmental groups actually recommended me for the job.
Okay. I'll yield. Would you like me to yield my remainder of time to you?
We'll come back next, I think.
Okay, I'll do the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Now recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the ranking member and the chairman for calling this hearing. You know, I'm a child of Michigan and have dedicated 25 years of my life to public service. And this issue has created anxiety, sadness, frustration, and right now I have knots in my stomach because, as my colleagues have said, we're pointing the fingers at each other, where this is a point where each of you should stand up and accept responsibility. I want to ask a few questions. Mr. Edwards, because we need to fix this problem. And I share with you your frustration and your passion about EPA. And we collectively, because everyone's, talking about this as a partisan issue, we work together. First of all, we're here today because we work together. The Republican chair and the ranking member Democrat agree that this is something that's worthy of a hearing. And EPA should have, as we have now passed a law that does not give them an option. It was a loophole, and you agreed to that. Let's talk about the primacy issue. So the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality has primacy, and that means that they have the responsibility for the public water system. And something that was interesting to me, they did not provide the corrosion control. Why not?
For the life of me, I can't figure this out. This is such a specialized skill. That's why we have a law that says thou shalt have corrosion control. We have people at the state, at the primacy agency, to make sure that law is followed. So for the life of me, I do not understand why it was not followed, because every dollar you spend on corrosion control not only protects children from lead, it saves $10 a minimum in terms of damage to your pipe infrastructure. And in Flint's case, it would have saved $10,000 per dollar invested.
Mr. Earl, you are an appointee of the state. The Michigan Environmental Department is a state. Can you tell me why? Have you been advised or told why the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality did not provide erosion control? Was it financial? Was it, oops, we forgot? Because it was clear documentation that EPA, although they did not tell the public, made them aware. You in your capacity as a appointee of the state, has anyone made you aware of why they did not provide the corrosion?
No, that has not been brought to my attention. The issue of the corrosion control and all of that came pretty much after I was there. As I tried to say earlier, the issues we were dealing with were related to the TTHM and the other contaminants.
And that's a good point, because clearly water that we drink out of our faucets do not have that in there. So there should have been some chemical added to the water. It sounds as if they went to the Flint River and just turned on the faucet. So why did not they provide at minimum bacteria control?
I can't answer the reason why they didn't.
Did anyone, while you were there, ask that question? Why did they not treat the water in Flint?
The questions that we were asking during my tenure was how to deal with the contaminants that we knew were in the water, the TTHM, the E. coli, and the coliform.
And at no time did anyone ask why in the city of Flint you would turn water on, make it go through the faucets for human beings to drink, and they are experts. You have a water treatment system and no one treated the water.
Well, the water was treated, but the corrosion controls were not there, and they were not part of the discussion.
Sir, at first we had bacteria in the water. You do not have bacteria in water that's treated. So we're talking about the corrosion control. That's for the lead. But under your leadership, it was contaminated water.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And no one asked the question. So how do we know how to fix it if no one ever asked, why would we in America in 2016, with you being in charge, and you signed the contract regardless of who initiated it, and people in Flint, including yourself, knew that the water that was drinking had bacteria in it, which is unacceptable. At no time we asked, why did this happen?
Of course we asked why did it happen.
And what was the answer?
As it related to the issues that we were treating. We were told the protocols in which to treat the contaminants that we were working with, the TTHM and the E. coli and the coliform treatment. The issue of lead treatment and lead corrosion.
I'm not talking about lead. Let's talk about when you were there.
Okay. Well, when I was there, we treated for the contaminants that were in the water. We followed the DEQ protocols for boiling water advisories on 2 separate occasions. When we still had problems with the water and we're not meeting.
In America, we don't normally boil water. We turn on the faucet and drink it and trust the government to provide us with water that's safe. If I was responsible for the public trust, that would have been my #1 answer, to make sure we didn't have to keep boiling the water. Why did it happen?
Well, when it happened the second time, I sought the input.
Second time?
Yes, because we were told after we did the things that we had done before, we were given all clears for the water, and that the treatment, the precautionary measures had worked.
I served as a mayor of a local community. And this is my core problem with emergency management. Anytime did you hold a public meeting with the citizens to find out what their concerns were? Did you hold public input meetings?
There were meetings held after the issue of the contamination when I left in January. There were meetings held after that.
But while you were there, you did not engage the public.
We did not have meetings.
Did not engage the public.
The water staff did engage the public as complaints came in and were a part of trying to find solutions for the problems that we were dealing with.
This is a fundamental problem with emergency management. philosophy is that you report only to a bottom line and to the governor, and that the voice of the people are eliminated in this process. Mr. Chair, I know I'm over, but may I ask one more question? I want to ask this question when it comes to primacy. See, I'm infuriated that someone made a deliberate decision not to treat this water when the primacy or the responsibility of drinking water rests with the state. Yes, we should hold EPA accountable. We have passed a law now from all sides, both sides agreeing that this shall not, EPA must notify the public and stop the water. But before that, how do we get our arms around as a congressional body that no state will take the arrogance and the destructive criminal activity to poison people? How do we get there?
I would like to know that question myself, how this decision was made to not follow the law. I mean, did they forget? Were they trying to save money? I really have no idea.
Mr. Early, he said he was sitting there as in charge as emergency manager. You don't know the answer. Mayor Walding, can you give me an answer?
I don't have an answer because the initial treatment design did not include the carbon filter that later had to be added. That actually meant there was additional chlorine and the TTHM problem. So there was no corrosion control, there was no carbon filter. All of these warning signs that were going off, they all go back to the original treatment design that the MDEQ and the emergency manager put in place and budgeted for in June of 2013, and we're still waiting on answers as to how those decisions actually got made, what the considerations were. I don't know.
I yield back my time. This is where we need to go because we cannot have this happen again. Thank you.
Thank the gentlewoman. Now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Edwards, in an email recently released to the public dated September 11th, 2015, EPA's Michigan Program Director states the following. Just to clarify, on our call, I wanted to remind you that Miguel's report had the DEQ CC'd. So if the legislature or whoever might say you were all CC'd, you can truthfully respond that it was the EPA's request that the report not be sent to the CCs. Consequently, you all never received the report from Miguel. Good to talk with you all. The program director was referring to Miguel del Toro's memo that had recently been made public and is addressed to a number of employees with EPA.gov and Michigan.gov domain names. It appears to function to instruct such employees on a way to circumvent public and legislative accountability. It also portrays government collaboration to manage and spin a situation. When you see an email like this, Dr. Edwards, what does it tell you about the government prioritizing obfuscation over protecting the public interest?
Well, it's very clear that MDQ and EPA were working hand in hand to cover this problem up, as reflected by that email with Jennifer Crooks. And this revisionist history where EPA was fighting MDQ every step of the way is just ludicrous.
Well, what does this email tell you about the EPA's continued disregard for Mr. Del Toro's warnings?
I just don't know how you could have disregarded those warnings as they did. They just sat there silent.
Well, there's got to be a reason for why they didn't want his warnings to get out there. Why they wanted to apparently give cover.
They provided all kinds of cover for MDQ at every step of the way. Every step of the way, EPA was there covering up for MDQ.
Do you believe it provides cover, that a memo like that was intended to provide cover?
Well, MDQ actually took her advice in the letter responding to Kill D. They basically cited that excuse verbatim.
Do you believe this email shows, at a minimum, a callous disregard for public safety?
Amongst a few EPA employees, the vast majority of EPA employees at Region 5 come to work every day and do their best to do their job under difficult circumstances.
I thank you for that clarification because